Hey guys, my name is Octodoodle and welcome to episode 12 of Krunker Map Making Tips and Tricks. In this episode we're going to be going over how to make a really nice and clean water animation for use in your Krunker maps. Anyways, first things first, let's see how it looks. So as we can see at the top of this little waterfall, we've got a nice little water animation, pretty simple but creates a nice effect. Now if we go down to the bottom here, you can see how it has that nice falling effect, and then down at the bottom it's got a little bit of overspill, and then the water just continues to normal. And if we come back to the top up here with our handy dandy teleporter, we've got a nice little path and everything, and it all just looks fine and dandy. Anyways, let's see how we make this. Now there are three parts to making this water effect. The first part is the base water, which is the semi-opaque objects you can see here. An important part of this is making sure they merge together nicely and don't have weird seams. And then the second part is the particles that we see here at the top and at the bottom. Then the third part is just making this overspill and the waterfall. So pretty much how it works is we've got a medium speed water at the top, then it speeds up here and then goes back to normal speed down here, and we've got a little bit of overspill. Anyways, let's see how we make this from start to finish. First things first, make a cube, move it to where you want the top of your waterfall to be, and shape it to the shape that you want the stream at the top of your waterfall to be. In this case, we're just going to make it this sort of size. And next, you're going to want to set it to the default texture and the color to a sort of nice blue. Quite light is generally what I like. Set the opacity to 0.6, that's sort of the sweet spot for the opacity in this situation. Now, make sure that it is not collidable. Now you're going to want to duplicate this using Shift plus R. Duplicate it across and make it sort of this shape so it merges with the edge here. You may have to adjust the size of this one slightly. What this is going to do is act as a corner piece so that we can have these two parts merged together without weird seam lines. So we're going to turn off the face rendering of this part of this one here. So what you can do to do that is click M, and then select this, and then here, do the same. And then you want to do the same thing underneath. Then click M again to turn off face selection. Now connect these back up. Now, duplicate this using Shift plus R. Now turn back on this bottom face and this side face, and turn off the top face. And move this down to where you want the bottom of your waterfall to be, and then just extrude it up. So this is where the bottom of our waterfall is going to be. Now what you can do is just make sure you've got face selection off, and then duplicate the top of your waterfall and move it to where the bottom of yours is. And at the bottom here, what you want to do is have it intersect like this does here. You don't want the bottom one connecting into the side of the waterfall part. You want the waterfall part intersecting into the top of the bottom one. Now that we've got this, I'm just going to quickly make a little bit of terrain around it. Generally, one thing I like to do is underneath these flat sections have dirt, and that just creates a nice sort of river bottom feel. And then for the cliff, just use the wall texture set to its default color. Sweet, now that I've done the general terrain for this, it's time to make the particle effects. What you're going to want to do is create a particle generator, so go over to Object, then to Tools, and then down to Particles. After you've spawned that in, just bring it across to where your little river is, and make it the general size of the top of your stream. And you want it to be ever so slightly smaller than it. And you also want it to extend out past the top of it by just a little bit. So generally I like to make mine just go 1 unit above. After you've done that, just extrude it out to be the size of yours and have it go over the edge just slightly. Now you're going to want to set the texture to Ember, the blending to Additive, the count to about 17 or around 10 is pretty good for me, so I'm just going to set mine to 13, the size set to 2.5, the scale to 1. Now make sure it's going in the direction indicated by this purple arrow that your river is flowing. So in this case it's going to be going in this direction, so that's 1. And set the speed to at least 1.7. At this point it's going relatively slow, so 1.7 is perfect. Now color wise, generally sort of a dark blue is pretty good for this, so something around this is pretty good. Now if we want to, we can just quickly test this out to see how it looks. So now that we're in here, we can see that it looks pretty good, and in general just has sort of the right colors. Although it's slightly too high, so I'm just going to move it down a little bit. Now that I've made this adjustment, it's looking a lot better and should be good for this top section. Next up, we're going to make the waterfall part. The first step to making the waterfall is duplicating the particle thing that you've just made. So duplicate it with Shift plus R. After you've duplicated it, move it so that it's over where your waterfall is, and make it so that it's only ever so slightly larger than the waterfall itself, so it extends slightly past it. After you've done that, move it so that it starts at the bottom of the waterfall and makes its way all the way to the top. If not slightly below the top, because the way the particles generate, they generate slightly above the generator. So after you've done this, you want to set the speed to 0. So just go down here and make that edit. You want to leave the size the same, but you're going to want to set the gravity to something around 3.6. I'm just going to set mine to 3.5. And set the deceleration to -1. Now that we've done this, we should have the waterfall done. But while we're here, I'm just going to duplicate the particle thing we have at the top here and put it at the bottom as well, because it is identical. So just duplicate it with Shift R and move it down to the bottom. Now that we've done this, we've got everything except the little white bits that waterfalls have at the bottom. But let's give it a quick test to see how it looks. Now that we're in, we can see the top here still looks good, and we've got the bit at the bottom, as well as the waterfall starting to shape up. Anyways, now it's time to add the little bit of white at the bottom. So let's do it. First things first, you want to select the particle generator you have at the bottom, and you want to duplicate it using Shift R. Now in the meantime, we're just going to move it up and out of the way so that it's easier to manipulate. After you've done this, shorten it so that it just comes out a little bit from the edge of the bottom of the waterfall, like so. And set the color to white. Set the texture to default, the blending to normal, the count to 7, the size to 3, the speed to 3.7, and everything else at 0. After you've done this, just move it so that it's slightly above your water. Sweet, now that we've done this, this should be completely done. Let's give it a test. Sweet, well we've finished this up, let's take a look at how this looks. This looks pretty great and has a nice overflow effect, and in general it's just sort of a nice effect. There's a few more things we can do to make this water look a little bit better though, and I'll show you how. One part of making water look really good is having things coming out of it so that it looks, we can see that stuff is submerged in it. So one way to do this is have a nice little rock path like seen over here. Let's make this really quick. So let's just duplicate a random object that you've got over here. In this case I'm just going to duplicate the dirt because it's at a good height and is near it. So we're just going to duplicate that using Shift R and then make it a small size sort of like so. Set the color to default and make it a nice grey. You can also set it to wall and not change the color at all. We're going to make this non-collidable. After you've done this, just duplicate it using Shift R a few times and change the size slightly, just so it looks like little rocks in a stream. Now once you're happy with the general shape of the rocks, it's time to give them a hitbox. This isn't necessary, but it makes it a bit nicer when the player interacts with them. So just duplicate one of them using Shift R, make that collidable and make it invisible by deselecting the visible option, and just make it so that it's the general shape of all of your rocks. So I'm just going to make mine like this. It doesn't matter if it's larger or slightly smaller. And once we've done this, this is completely done, and it's time to give it a final test. Sweet, now I've got these rocks in here, it looks really nice and adds a little bit more character to the stream. Anyways guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. This video was actually a suggestion from a viewer after they had played on my map serene endings and seen a similar sort of thing being used and decided that, they'd like to know how to do that. So of course, if you guys have any suggestions, please leave it in the comments, and if you're lucky, I might do a video on it. Anyways guys, that's it for the video. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you next time.